Hi, I'm JP, and I'm joined by Pop-Up Podcasting producers Will, Lisa, and Richard. Emma, our intern, is taking care of recording and production on the other side of the glass. Thanks, Emma. Today is part 2 of our conversation about origin stories. Last time we heard from you 3 producers, and this time you're turning the tables on me, and you'll be asking me some questions about how I started the company and how we got to where we are today. Let's get into it. Over to you, Lisa, with the first question.
Yeah, so I was going to say, obviously now you've got the company and this is going on, but what was sort of the trajectory early on that got you into audio editing in the first place?
Good question. I started, like we were talking in the last episode, I started like you guys as a podcast fan and a podcast listener. And this was, 2010 ish. I was working at the University of Toronto, actually living in Toronto, and working with a friend of mine. And every Monday we would talk about that weekend's episode of This American Life. We were both avid listeners of that show, and just kind of like got to talking and decided to try our hand at podcasting as well. So really kind of like a hobby to begin with. We weren't like, we're going to get rich and build a huge audience or anything like that. We just wanted to play around with it and try it out. We were both single at the time and both trying out online dating for the first time. So we were decided to do our podcast around that. So our podcast was called I Like You. And
are those episodes still live?
No. I mean, probably some that can be found. I have a secret archive of them, but I'm like very much an experiential learner. So I'm like, I got to make all the mistakes. I got to just like dive in and muck around with things to figure them out. So that's really how I got into podcast editing, and later I went into the Transom Story Workshop, which is this radio documentary intensive down in the States. So that was like me deciding to kind of go pro from there. Kind of got into doing some freelance work on the side after that, and eventually quit my job and worked as a radio and podcasting freelancer for 5 years. And then Pop-Up Podcasting was born basically out of clients asking me, is there somewhere we can like go to record this? Because I was doing a lot of just like, here's how you can record yourself at home, send me the files, blah, blah, blah. And people were starting to get more professional about it and wanting a space to do that. And I thought, let's give it a go. And I was living in Ottawa at the time, so opened the Ottawa studio from there.
JP, you mentioned This American Life, but do you remember what the sort of first hook was with podcasting that got you, like, and obviously really captured you as you go on to start a business around it and everything like that? But do you remember what the first thing was that got you hooked?
Yeah, it's a good question, and it's hard to say. Like we were like a CBC radio family growing up. Yep. It was just like on in the kitchen all the time and in the car and stuff. So I kind of knew a little bit about the power of audio, and how as a kid, the news and stuff I would tune out, but every so often something would come on that would really capture my attention. So I think it's, it comes from that a bit, but podcasting specifically is like, this is real, right? This is like, I don't know, we throw around the word authentic a lot, and I'm kind of sick of it in some ways, but it was real and authentic. And I would listen to comedy podcasts where they would like swear and talk about, things like that you wouldn't hear on the normal radio. So This American Life is like a very like professional NPR show. But I think their thing is also like getting out of the studio and getting into these intimate moments in people's lives and stuff like that. So I think it was sort of that, that realness, of it. Like every so often you think, am I supposed to be hearing this, one of my like little favorite things in podcasting is when somebody in a podcast I'm listening to says, we got to cut that out. Like, producer, cut that out. And you're like, they clearly like either forgot to take it out or decided to leave it in because it was, it's a fun moment. And I really like those things. I've also really always been into like tech. I was, I was in the AV club in school and, like always played with computers and stuff like that. So that kind of connection of tech and this like kind of storytelling realness, being a fly on the wall. I'm also an introvert, so I don't like being a fly on the wall is very appealing to me, where like I don't have to participate in this like intense conversation, but I can listen to it and learn from it and get all the juicy gossip. So
I definitely understand you being in the AV club. That makes
tracks.
a lot of sense because like I don't know, like you when we get a new piece of tech or program or something, you definitely pick up on the enthusiasm. So that's cool. That's sort of like interested in like the new thing, storytelling kind of merges perfectly with podcasting. So I think you did a good job in finding a passion there.
No, it's been good.
You said like you started the company because you had people asking you like if there were spaces around to like record stuff. So that was like the birth of the idea. Did you ever think about it before then?
I mean, I think I was dreaming of it when I was, sitting at home editing podcasts with, from clients that sent me terrible sounding audio of like, this feels like very like, desk in the corner of my bedroom. And I'm like, it'd be so cool to have like a real studio and like, this real space. But I've also had this kind of entrepreneurial bug for a really long time. And I have a really I think part of the reason I like in the last episode, you guys were talking about how I try, and it's not always possible, but I try to be a very like flexible and understanding boss and bring some empathy to the table about the work that's, sometimes not as fun and stuff like that. But I think I come by that honestly because I've had trouble in the past with like being an employee and like, being like, do this way, cause that's the way we do it. And, thinking in my head, I think there's a better way, but no, you have to do it this way. Or, working on something where, the fruits of your labor never see the light of day and stuff like that. So it's, I think in some ways I started a company because I have trouble being, working for someone else.
I mean, I have struggled being an employee for other companies because of what you mentioned. Like especially when you go work for like huge, massive companies or chains or whatever, and it's just everyone's just kind of collecting paychecks or whatever. It can be very demoralizing. Like your bosses won't really talk to you at all. They'll just like no one cares about anybody. It's just really like sad to go into work and it's not fun. Yeah. And like I think you did a great job of not instilling that here, because like you'll get like a random like message from JP being like, "Hey, good job on this," and you're like, "Oh, cool. Thanks." Like just little
you
things
get those
like that.
Messages?
I mean,
Richard, those are just between you and me.
No, I don't get those messages. But like it's nice. It's just like, okay, cool. Like everyone kind of appreciates each other at the company. So I think you get like your reasoning behind starting the company. I think you succeeded in what you wanted to do for sure.
Yeah. I'll say like just hearing you. I don't know. I just thought of another thing, so I'll say it. Being a freelancer also wasn't my bag. And I think this company is sort of the evolution of quitting my job at the University of Toronto, which wasn't really fulfilling to me, becoming a freelancer. Parts of that were great, but parts of it were like, oh, I'm like having to come up with story ideas I can pitch to shows all the time. And like, there's a lot of, unpaid parts of this job where I'm just like trying to find the next gig. And part of it was to like bring together a bit more of like a collective, like the four of us, to have a steadier stream of work and even out some of those bumps in the road, and also have this magnet of like the studio and the company where ideally people are finding us and working with us longer term, as opposed to it being really like every Monday waking up and saying like, oh, where am I going to find the next the next paycheck? So yeah, that's part of it too.
So not to focus on difficulty and hurdles, but with starting the company, we talked a bit about what were the things that came together that made that work and why you liked it. But what were some of the hurdles that you did have to overcome once you started the company?
Yeah. I'm still overcoming hurdles, I would say. It's not always smooth sailing, but it's, I don't know, it's sort of this double-edged sword of like, I really like learning new things and figuring things out. But also I started this company being like, I think I'm pretty good at editing podcasts. I can do this. Like this could be my living. And then starting a company is like a whole other thing. And you have to like deal with like, HR and accounting and marketing and sales and, systems and all this. And like, there is a part of me that, as you guys know, from our work on our task management system, where I'm like, this is kind of cool. I like nerding out on this stupid task management system. But it's also, yeah, it's like a daily challenge. So for me, it keeps me invested in a way where, if you like solving problems, start a company, because you'll have a never ending bucket of problems to pull from. But that's also not easy sometimes. And like I have, friends and my wife, and we're in Ottawa. A lot of people work for the federal government, and I'm sure you guys have had this thought too, because we don't always have steady work, and clients are wanting things after hours and blah blah blah. But like, gee, it would be kind of nice to just have that 9 to 5 with like benefits and a pension and all the rest of it. And I've worked for the government a little bit earlier in my career, and so I in those moments I try to remind myself of like how kind of soul sucking I found that.
Thank you. Yes,
it's not. Yeah, like I honestly, like I don't think of my friends and family who work those jobs as like, mindless drones or whatever. Like they're doing good work, and they have good colleagues they work with, and they for the most part enjoy their jobs. But like it just for me personally, I just hit a wall, and I'm like, I just can't fill out another TPS report or whatever it is.
No, I mean, I like agree, like that 9 to 5 thing. It's not really for me. Like, I like this style of work where you get bookings, you get clients, you like new stuff coming in, not all the time. And there's always new challenges, and it's exciting. So yeah, it's definitely, I'm with you on that.
Yeah.
I'm not a 9 to 5 guy.
Yeah. I'm trying to think of, though, in relation to your question, if there's like a specific challenge. The most recent challenge, and it worked out well in the end, was working with Will on building the new studio. He's a really hard guy to get along with.
Yeah, I was happy you ended with on building the new studio there. I thought it was just going to be on working with Will.
It was a pleasure working with Will, but
I see.
But we have lots of constraints. We don't have unlimited budget and blah, blah, blah. And like we had to pivot our studio setup for COVID. And then we're like, oh, COVID's kind of settling down. We can change it up again, but we still had this like very limited footprint to work with. So kind of fitting every scenario that we want into that and making sure that all the clients were still going to be happy was like a technical challenge, I guess. And otherwise, like, I've felt very lucky that during COVID and throughout our growth as a company, we have grown, and it's been fairly organic, where a lot of our clients are recommending us to other people, and we have word of mouth and stuff like that. But I think that kind of marketing and branding side of it is gonna be the next hurdle for me, because there's lots of tools out there for people to do this at home on their own. There's other companies coming into the space. We were kind of had an early mover advantage, where, we still have the issue of like, oh, Ottawa has a podcast studio. Cool. Yeah. I didn't know. Yeah. So it's not the kind of, we don't have a lot of competition, but we also have lots of
indirect competition.
Yeah, like friction, as far as just like, is this a type of business that exists that that can help me with my problems?
I do have a follow-up question about, because you mentioned the studio. So I was wondering, so you get the idea for the company, and then you want to start it. How long between, like, okay, you thought of it and getting the space up and running?
Yeah. So, okay, you've triggered another memory. I have a terrible memory, by the way. So this comes in drips and drabs. But part of it too was I applied for a job and didn't get it, and that was part of starting Pop-Up Podcasting. I was freelancing, and I was like, I applied for several jobs along the way. My mom. The other day I was telling her, like, business has been a bit slower lately. It's tough. And she's like such a fan of being like, well, have you thought about getting a job at CBC? And I'm just like, I always, like I tried for 5 years to get a job at CBC, to be honest. Like,
it's tough.
It's tough to get your foot in the door. And some of the people I talked to, maybe I dodged a bullet by not going there. But anyway, this was a different job where it was sort of like, okay, I want to stop freelancing alone at home all the time. I want to, work in a team and stuff like that. So I applied for a job at Shopify, famous Ottawa company. Shopify was hiring a full-time podcast producer. And I got through like a couple rounds of interviews, and then didn't end up getting the job.
They missed out.
Yeah, well, there you go. Maybe I missed out on getting those sweet Shopify stock options. But it was, after that, it was sort of like, okay, this is like, there are not a lot of people hiring full-time positions in this space. This was 6 years ago, something like that. So maybe I have to do something on my own. And that was, there was this moment of like, okay, that was like, I was kind of like hoping that was going to work out. It didn't work out. Time to regroup, try something else. Cause I had been trying to get a real job. My mom would have been so happy.
So how long from that point did you have your first running studio?
Yeah. So good question. I don't remember the timeline super well. So Pop-Up Podcasting opened in, I think I got the lease. I got the space at the beginning of February 2017. And it was,
wow. Yeah. I'm just thinking, when I came on, then you wouldn't have been up for very long. I didn't realize that.
It was early days for sure. And we, it was probably like a few months, honestly. And like, I've done kind of web design. I can kind of hack together some graphic design, whatever. So it was kind of like stuff I was just in between freelance gigs, churning away at doing a website and stuff. And I learned this concept in my sort of entrepreneurial journey of the minimum viable product. And that's really like what's helped me like get going on on opening pop-up podcasting. It was really like, okay, what's the tiniest space I can get downtown? I want it to be downtown because there's lots of businesses and Parliament and all that. What are like the cheapest professional looking and sounding mics? What's the so there's all this. And Lisa remembers the original studio. We didn't have like a separation of two rooms, a control room and a studio space. Wow. It was like the engineer desk was in the corner and the recording table was at the other end of the room. So you
added that wall?
We were on the 12th floor, and now,
so you moved.
Now we're on the 5th floor.
I wish we could find out if it's vacant. Maybe we could show Richard. That'd be so cool.
Did Will see the 12th floor too?
I don't know.
It's tiny, tiny, guys.
I never saw it.
Oh, wow.
Yeah.
Cool. I didn't know.
Our current space is still pretty tiny, but
you did a good job with the space. It was a good use of space.
Yeah.
Oh, wow. That's awesome.
It was basically like I think of it as a parking space in some ways, of like this kind of like long, narrow, and not very wide space. But so to answer your, I mean, it was probably like a few months.
That's what I would assume, because there's a lot of setting up to do, right?
But we can show pictures. Like Richard, we could show him pictures, right? You have pictures.
Yeah.
Oh, cool. Yeah.
In fact, here's a picture of the old studio space.
Right now.
Wow.
Yeah.
Magic.
Pretty cool, right, Richard? Anyway, a few months for sure.
Cool.
But it was pretty quick, and like I enjoy that kind of, again, like the tech, the setup, the blah blah blah.
Yeah.
So I was putting a lot of energy into it, and I was also just like, what can we do to get to just like doors open, first client. Like I bought an old table off Kijiji. Like there was a lot of scrounging and stuff.
So for the viewers who don't know, we have a lot of TVs in the studio. How many TVs were in the first iteration of the studio?
0. I think there was one computer monitor.
Lisa's life was so much easier back then. She hates all the TVs.
Yeah. There's a lot of.
I'm coming around.
The one remote works on all the TVs, so sometimes you turn on one TV and the other two turn off, and blah blah blah. Anyway,
so many TVs.
So many.
It is funny though. It is kind of like a.
It's a good question. First client. Ooh. Yeah. I don't. I remember like. Kwadwo Karamantang was a doctor here in town. Was early, I think.
Wow.
No, and there were a few like funny ones where it was like, oh, you have a studio, like we. The Conservative Party is in the building, or was, and they were like, oh, we have these little like anti-Trudeau videos that we need to record voiceover for. Nice. Can we come down and record those? Funny. And like, sure. I guess.
Before it was popular.
Who were the two people, the comedians? I liked their show. That was a funny one to record.
Yeah. Ryan Mulligan and Christina. I can't remember her last name.
Shout out to them. Yeah. That's awesome. I didn't know that you guys had like a comedian.
That was a really fun show. Scene Partners is the show. I'm not sure if they're still running.
Yeah.
But, nice. that was a fun one for sure.
Nice. Yeah, they were always funny.
Yeah.
So, JP, you touched on a sort of a bunch of different spaces the studio's been in, different sort of changes in the business, pandemic, hiring, interns and then staff and everything. Is there, if you could go back, with all the lessons learned, any, kind of advice you'd want to impart to yourself, or, that tip you'd want to give yourself to save yourself some trouble down the road, what would it be?
Yeah.
Right.
Good question. I think I did it. I did it perfectly.
It's definitely
bring on Richard earlier.
Bring on Richard at first, so you don't have to pay him for all the freelance work.
Yeah, really.
Oh wow, yeah.
Unpaid internships. They're so unpaid internships are kind of awkward as our unpaid intern listens in here.
It's recording this.
Yeah.
Well, I was thinking about, you guys were talking about how it was nice to get to know me before we started working together. And I appreciate that about internships too, is that we can get to know each other and see if it'd be a good fit. But if it wasn't for academic credit, I would not hire unpaid interns. I'm generally against that, but it's turned out to be a good place to find great. Why am I? Oh God, great employees.
Great employees.
Yeah.
Great stuff.
Great place to stutter, JP. So what was the question? Oh, lessons learned.
Just maybe like one piece of advice, like
right.
maybe more like big picture business wise or something. It doesn't even have, it could be something small that just would have been a lifesaver or something, I guess.
Yeah. Hindsight's 2020, but I mean, right now I'm realizing the importance of focusing on the stuff I'm not already good at. So, again, sort of that, like, what's that machine that brings in clients month after month? Got really lucky on word of mouth and Google and stuff like that. But, especially now that we have a team and all this, like, I want to be able to, make your jobs fruitful and all the rest of it, and just have the company operate. I think maybe every entrepreneur goes through this, but I certainly have, where like I have imposter syndrome, where I'm like, this doesn't always feel like a real company. Some of the things we do are kind of like rinky dink, and and I just like the so my advice to my former self would be, if you want this to be a real company and build a real team around it, you got to focus on the kind of business fundamentals too, a bit more in some ways. I'm good at making podcasts, I think, and I hired a bunch of people who are good at making podcasts, but like somebody, namely me, needs to worry more about the stuff that's not making podcasts. So
that's a good one.
Yeah. It's kind of like the annoying things in some ways about like starting a company, something you enjoy doing. And then you're like, okay, actually I have to like hire, and you guys know that I've kind of like started over the past couple of years, especially, having kids and stuff, started to step away from day-to-day production and starting to, to focus more on those things. But there is this aspect to it that's like, oh, but I really like making podcasts.
Yeah. No, that's a good point. I mean, you start the company because you like making podcasts, but you forget there's a company to run. So there's so much more. And I can only imagine. I mean, that's a good piece of advice to give your younger self. Yeah. Focus on everything that is not what you're already good at. Yeah, I love that.
Yeah. And some people say, and hopefully we can grow to the size of doing this eventually, but your first hire shouldn't be another you. It should be somebody who's good at all that stuff that you're not good at.
Right.
And that's, not to throw shade on hiring you guys. I'm really happy with the decision, and it's important for me to be able to understand the business and work on those aspects myself too, as opposed to just bringing in a hired gun to do that stuff. So thanks so much for listening to Pop-Up Podcasting, and thanks to Will, Lisa, and Richard for joining me, and to Emma as well in the control room. See you next time.
Produced at Pop-Up Podcasting.